This year, the winter retreat, the suggestion was made to go through the first of the three suttas given by the Buddha that we chant quite regularly, the Dhamma-Chapter Sutta and the Anatta-Lakkhana Sutta and the Adita-Pariyaya Sutta, so the discourse on the turning of the wheel of Dhamma, and then the Anatta-Lakkhana Sutta, teaching on not self, and then the fire sermon. And then by way of looking at the Dhamma-Chapter Sutta, I thought I would use this book of Ajahn Sucitto's, which is his commentary on the Dhamma-Chapter Sutta, and also the illuminated manuscript. Ooh. So this is a book of the original paintings that Ajahn Sucitto made, that were done. He was going to make up a nice little version of the Dhamma-Chapter Sutta to give to Lumpur Sumedho. It took 4 years to do. And these used to be all around the walls here in the sala, but then they got taken down and put together in this book. So as I read out, there's references to some of the pictures, so I'll pass this around as I go along. And then people can take a look-see. Also, there's other copies of this book in the library and around and about in different places in the monastery, so you can see for yourselves the different images and things that are being talked about. But I felt this was a very good, useful way of entering into reflections on the Buddha's first teaching, and to also use some of Ajahn Sucitto's reflections as a source for our own contemplation and insight. The Dhamma-Chakka Sutta is the first sermon of the Buddha. In the Theravada recension of the Buddha's teaching, presented in the ancient Pali language of India, there are three main divisions: the discourses, Sutta Pitaka, the books of the discipline, Vinaya Pitaka, and the books of metaphysics, the Abhidhamma. The sutta appears twice in its body of work, known as the Pali Canon, namely in the Vinaya Pitaka and in the Sutta Pitaka. Scholars generally agree that the material in these works was collected over a period of time which extended beyond the Buddha's passing away, the Parinibbana. It is traditionally held that the main body of the Sutta Pitaka was recited by the Venerable Ananda at a Sangha council held soon after the Parinibbana, and at that same meeting the Venerable Upali recited the text of the Vinaya. Even though these are enormous texts, it is not impossible for clear-minded beings to remember them and learn them by heart. In fact, there are a few bhikkhus in this present day and age who can do just that. However, it is generally agreed that these early recitations were later polished and augmented into texts that we have today. In fact, some of the suttas are set in a time that postdates the Buddha's life, while chapters of the Vinaya relate the affairs of the first and second Sangha councils held about 100 years apart. So, subsequent additions and commentaries are an accepted part of the canon. It's generally agreed that the text of the Abhidhamma is of a later date than that of the other two Pitakas. It does not mean that the ideas expressed in the Abhidhamma are necessarily of a later date, only that its casting into a fixed form is. The accepted status of the Dhamma-Chakka Sutta as the first of the Buddha's discourses gives it a particular appeal. It also elucidates the Four Noble Truths, the teaching that he calls, quote, particular to Buddhas, unquote, and which is considered to be the heart of his dispensation. Nowadays, the sutta is especially chanted on Asala Puja, the full moon, which in the Buddhist calendar usually falls on the full moon day of July. This is traditionally held to be the day when the sutta was first taught by the Buddha, and it also immediately precedes the beginning of the 3-month monastic rains retreat. In Thailand today, many men will take ordination as Buddhist monks for the period of the Vasa. The Vasa is recognized as a time for more detailed and thorough practice when the bhikkhus refrain from traveling and determine to abide together in their monasteries. This gives the teacher an excellent chance to supervise his disciples, as well as allowing the Sangha the opportunity to clarify the observances and principles of training together. So, for many monks, the Dhamma-Chakka Sutta signifies a time when they can attend to their meditation practice and training with vigor and in a supportive environment of stability and instruction. so very suitable for winter retreat time also. Part of that practice may well be to learn the recitation of several suttas, including the Dhamma-Chapter Sutta, both for their own reflection and to support the practice of the laity who will congregate at such recitations. A group recitation followed by a period of meditation and a desana, a Dhamma talk, on the theme of the sutta would form an intrinsic part of the monks' and laity's observance on Asala Puja, that full moon day. Because this happens every year throughout the Buddhist world, the occasion has a value that extends beyond the meaning of the sutta itself. It establishes a community in the Dhamma and a sense of kinship with Buddhists near and far and bygone ages up, and from bygone ages up to the present. All of these considerations may help to explain the approach that I've taken with this current work. My intention, that's Ajahn Sucitto, is not to present a scholarly exegesis of the meaning of the sutta. Such interpretations as I offer should be understood as reflections from my own practice of the Dhamma rather than absolute statements about the meaning of the words. However, I've tried to consult the extensive compilations of the suttas and to follow a pattern of reviewing the sutta phrase by phrase, if not always word by word. So what I will do is, first of all, I'll read the sutta. We recite this, as people know, very regularly. It takes about 20 minutes to recite from beginning to end, and Ajahn Sucitto prefaces his reflections with the sutta written out. Although I can start passing, why don't I pass this around? So it's great. It really is a heavy Dhamma. So people want to take a look through. Treat carefully. There's only one copy of this in the world. No pressure. So anyone who's got greasy fingers or full coffee cups, be careful. So this is the sutta itself. Thus have I heard. Once the Blessed One was staying in the deer park at Isipatana near Varanasi. There he addressed the bhikkhus of the group of 5 thus. There are 2 extremes which should not be followed, bhikkhus, by someone who has gone forth. Devotion to pursuing sense pleasure, which is low, vulgar, worldly, ignoble, and produces no useful result, and devotion to self-denial, which is painful, ignoble, and produces no useful result. Avoiding both these extremes, bhikkhus, the middle way that the Tathagata has awakened to gives vision and insight knowledge, and leads to peace, profound understanding, full realization, and to nibbana. And what is the middle way that a Tathagata has awakened to, which gives vision and insight knowledge, and leads to peace, profound understanding, full realization, and to nibbana? It is the Noble Eightfold Path, that is to say, right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right collectedness. This is the middle way that a Tathagata has awakened to. Bhikkhus, there is this noble truth about dissatisfaction. Birth is problematic, aging is hard, dying is also hard to bear. Sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair are all painful. Association with what you dislike is unpleasant. Being apart from what you like is unpleasant. Not getting what you want is unpleasant. In brief, the 5 grasped aggregates are unsatisfactory. Bhikkhus, there is the noble truth of the origin of suffering. It is desire, which gives rise to fresh birth, bound up with relish and passion, running here and there, delighting in this and that. In other words, sense desire, desire for existing, and desire for extinction. Bhikkhus, there is the noble truth of the cessation of suffering. It is the complete fading away and cessation of this desire, its abandonment and relinquishment, the freedom from and discarding of it. Bhikkhus, there is the noble truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering. It is the Noble Eightfold Path, namely, right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right collectedness. There is this noble truth of suffering. Such was the vision, insight, wisdom, knowing and light that arose in me about things not heard before. This noble truth must be penetrated to by fully understanding suffering. Such was the vision, insight, wisdom, knowing and light that arose in me about things not heard before. This noble truth has been penetrated to by fully understanding suffering. Such was the vision, insight, wisdom, knowing and light that arose in me about things not heard before. So in case you're not hearing that clearly, it's difficult to sort of represent exactly in the spoken word what the Buddha is doing here. He is, and I'll go into this in more detail as we go along through the sutta. With the analysis of each of these four truths, there are three modes or three sections. There is the first of all, there is the pariyatti, or the study, the intellectual knowledge of it. There is this noble truth of suffering, and then there is the means where it is to be handled, or the way to work with it. So that is the how you practice with it, the patipatti. So that there is this noble truth of suffering. Then secondly, this noble truth must be penetrated to by fully understanding suffering. So that's the method of handling it, is by being penetrated to by fully understanding it. And then the pativeda, the realization, the third mode, is this noble truth has been penetrated to by fully understanding suffering. So for each of the four truths, there is the statement of its understanding of its presence, then the method of working with it, and then the fact of having fully penetrated and worked with it to its completion. So then the second one. There is this noble truth of the origin of suffering. Such was the vision, insight, wisdom, knowing and light that arose in me about things not heard before. This noble truth must be penetrated to by abandoning the origin of suffering. This noble truth has been penetrated to by abandoning the origin of suffering. Such was the vision, insight, wisdom, knowing and light that arose in me about things not heard before. There is this noble truth of the cessation of suffering. Such was the vision, insight, wisdom, knowing and light that arose in me about things not heard before. This noble truth must be penetrated to by realizing the cessation of suffering. This noble truth has been penetrated to by realizing the cessation of suffering. Such was the vision, insight, wisdom, knowing and light that arose in me about things not heard before. There is this noble truth of the path leading to the cessation of suffering. Such was the vision, insight, wisdom, knowing and light that arose in me about things not heard before. This noble truth must be penetrated to by cultivating the path. And then lastly, this noble truth has been penetrated to by cultivating the path. Such was the vision, insight, wisdom, knowing and light that arose in me about things not heard before. As long, bhikkhus, as these four noble truths in their 12 aspects were not seen clearly as they are, I did not declare to the world, with its devas, maras and brahmas, with its samanas and brahmins, its monarchs and ordinary folk, that I had realized the complete, perfect awakening. But as soon as these four noble truths in their 12 aspects were seen clearly as they are, then I taught the world, with its devas, maras and brahmas, its samanas and brahmins, its monarchs and ordinary folk, that I had realized the complete and perfect awakening. The knowledge and the vision arose in me. Unshakable is my deliverance. This is the last birth. There is no further becoming. Thus spoke the Blessed One, and the group of 5 bhikkhus were gladdened, and they approved of his words. Now while this discourse was being delivered, the untarnished and clear insight into Dhamma arose in Venerable Kandanya thus: whatever has the nature to arise has the nature to cease. When the wheel of Dhamma had been set rolling by the Blessed One, the devas of the earth raised the cry, "At Varanasi, in the deer park at Isipatana, the matchless wheel of Dhamma has been set rolling by the Blessed One, not to be stopped by any samana or brahmin, a deva or mara or brahma, or anyone in the world." When they heard what the earth devas had said, then the devas of the realm of the 4 great kings cried out with one voice, "At Varanasi," and so forth, When they heard the cry of the Devas of the realm of the 4 great kings, then the Devas of the realm of the 33 cried out with one voice. So this is going up through the heavenly realms. They sort of overhear the Devas down below getting excited and shouting. So then the news spreads up through the heavenly realms. When they heard the cry of the 33 Devas, the Yamadevas cried out with one voice. When they heard the cry of the Yamadevas, the Sucitto Devas cried out with one voice. When they heard the cry of the Sucitto Devas, the Nimanarati Devas cried out with one voice. When they heard the cry of the Nimanarati Devas, the Paranimita Vasavati Devas cried out with one voice. When they heard the cry of the Paranimita Vasavati Devas, the Devas of the retinue of the Brahma deities took up the cry. At Varanasi, in the deer park at Isipatna, the matchless wheel of Dhamma has been set rolling by the Blessed One, not to be stopped by any samana or Brahmin, or Deva or Mara or Brahma, or anyone in the world. So, indeed, in that hour, at that moment, the word travelled up to the realm of the highest divinities, and this 10,000-fold world system shook and rocked and quaked, and the great measureless radiance surpassing the very nature of the Devas was displayed in the world. Then the Blessed One uttered the great exclamation, "Truly it is the good Kandanya who has understood. It is the good Kandanya who has understood." Thus it was, the name of Venerable Kandanya became Anya Kandanya, Kandanya who understands. This concludes the discourse on the setting in motion of the wheel of truth. So that didn't even take 5 minutes to read. I read quite quickly, so even though I'm trying to slow down. So right there, that little nugget is the whole of the Dhamma-Chapter Pavattana Sutta, and the substance of that we'll go over in detail over these coming days. But it's significant that one of the statements of the Buddha is that is very touching and impressive. When he said that it's through not understanding 4 things that you and I and all living beings have had to travel and trudge through this weary round of rebirth from beginningless time. And those 4 things are the nature of dukkha, the nature of its origin, the nature of its cessation, and the way leading to its cessation. It's through not understanding those 4 things that you and I and all of us have had to travel and trudge through this long and weary round of births, endlessly being born and dying. And so in this simple statement, in this sutta, then he maps out these 4 truths, and then as Ajahn Sucitto alluded to in the part of his introduction, that throughout the rest of the Buddha's life, most of his teaching was simply an elaboration and exploration of these 4 noble truths, and it was never the case that, this is the preliminary teaching and then we sort of get past that and we get on to the more significant teachings later on, but rather right up until the parinibbana, the end of the Buddha's life and dispensation in the world, then the 4 noble truths and this framework of the 4 truths and the middle way formed the very framework and the basis of his teaching throughout that time, and still is so today. And this also forms the basis of the teachings of Lumpur Cha, Lumpur Sameto over many, many years. There's also one of the suttas called the simile of the elephant's footprint, where it's obviously we don't have that many elephants wandering around in England, but in Asia, elephants were very, very common and very well-known creatures. And they use the simile of the elephant's footprint, and the image is that just as the footprint of the elephant, which is more than a foot across usually, at least I came across an elephant's footprint at Dowdam Monastery out on the Thai-Burmese border, and I tested it with my foot, and it was my feet are quite large, but it was this foot and then another foot width wide. So the elephant's footprint is very large. So just as the elephant's footprint contains the footprint of every other animal in the forest, no matter how large any other animal might be, its footprint is always smaller than that of an elephant. So too, the Four Noble Truths encompasses all other spiritual teachings, that they're all, are subsidiary, or they are say, contained within this teaching of the Four Noble Truths. So then I'll read his first little introductory chapter. The title Dhamma-Chapter Sutta has been translated as the sutta that set in motion the wheel of the truth, and rather oddly as the sutta on the foundation of the kingdom of the norm. Sutta literally means a thread, and is the usual way that a discourse of the Buddha is titled. It's a metaphor that suggests that what follows is an account of the gist of what may have been a longer or more loosely structured talk that the Buddha gave to a religious seeker. As I previously commented, these are oral recitations that had been compiled in formulaic style for easier memorization. They may also have been categorized and summarized for more succinct appreciation. At any rate, this thread is what the word suggests, the main strand of a teaching, given to a group of religious seekers over a period of time. In the Vinaya account of this discourse, the sutta is followed by a comment that the Buddha then exhorted the 4 disciples who had not realized the truth with further instruction. One can only surmise, as the talk is not recorded, that it was a talk of a similar nature, for which the Dhamma-Chapter Sutta conveys the core meaning. So this is referring to the fact that it was only Kondanya understood and realized stream entry. Oftentimes people assume that when the Buddha gave this teaching that the 5 monks who were gathered together in the deer park with him, that they all became enlightened, but that's not the case. In fact, only Kondanya became a stream enterer, and the other 4 still did not understand the teaching profoundly. So that's what Ajahn Sucitto is referring to here. So when the Buddha realizes that Kondanya understands Anyasi Watabo Kondanyo, Anyasi Watabo Kondanyoti, it's only Kondanya who's understood, and so that the Buddha cries out, or makes this exclamation, and how then Kondanya got the nickname Anya Kondanya from that time on. And it was only when he gave the teaching on the Anatalakkhana Sutta, which is later during that same period, then when he gave that teaching, then all of the 5 disciples who were with him then became fully enlightened. But at that point, it's only Kondanya who was understood. So then to continue with his words here. The word Dhamma, or Dharma in Sanskrit, has a number of meanings that all imply a universal rather than a personal viewpoint. In one sense, it just means things, as part of a universal structure. All things, from bicycles to thoughts, are dhammas. Generally, when used in this context, a lowercase d is used. When thoughts are referred to in the purely personal context, identified as my thoughts, they're called sankhara. This gives a useful reflection on the way that terms are designated. Often what appears to be the same thing will be referred to by different words. It depends on our way of looking at it. Another meaning of Dhamma is the proper order of things. This is a central concept in the Vedas. It is the duty of each person to live in accordance with Dhamma, which may mean his or her profession, religious observance, or the social mores of that particular society, village, or family. This is close to the meaning of Dhamma as a teaching. When encountering one of these wandering teachers, people might very well inquire, what is your Dhamma? i.e., what are your principles? Be they doctrine or observance. In the Buddhist sense, the teaching of the Buddha is a Dhamma, but it's elevated as it is seen to be not just a conventional system, but a universal teaching that relates to principles which abide in the makeup and the activities of human beings and celestial beings too. Hence, in our linguistic conventions, we give it a capital letter. Ultimate truth, capital U, capital T, realized through liberation from every form of attachment, is also called Dhamma, the universal truth, the law, the way it is, all with capital letters. In such contexts, it's probably best just to adopt the word Dhamma into the English language. The Dhamma of the Buddha has a conventional application that creates order and harmony on the plane of everyday social life, and a transcendent teaching that focuses on individual liberation from attachment. In the Buddha's teaching, the conventional and the transcendent do not conflict. The transcendent realization of ultimate truth relies upon the conventional observance of morality and conduct. One result of this is that the Buddha's teaching transformed the tradition of independent, almost anarchic truth seekers into an order, the Sangha. So when he's talking about that independent, almost anarchic truth seekers, the word samana is a word for a yogi or a wanderer, a religious seeker. So the samanas would often have no particular religious affiliation, but as you sometimes find in India today, sort of freelance wandering sadhus of different kinds. So as he's saying here, that one result is that the Buddha's teaching transformed the tradition of independent, almost anarchic truth seekers into an order, the Sangha. The Sangha exists within a high degree of uniformity, discipline, and an infrastructure based upon dependence and unanimous agreement. Furthermore, the Buddha presented a teaching that illuminated a way of experiencing ultimate truth which householders could realize for themselves without relying on the interpretations of Brahmins. In the full practicing system of Dhamma, the gone-forth religious seekers and those living the family life support and encourage each other. No wonder that this teaching can be applied anywhere at any time. The Buddha called it the elephant's footprint. Every other religious teaching fits inside it. The next element of the title is the word chakka. This word also has several meanings. Its root meaning is that which is always turning, so it can mean a wheel or a cycle. It can also mean a vehicle, or in another sense, a sphere. Hence a region or a realm, a sphere of influence. When used in the formulaic epithet of the Raja Chakravatin, the wheel-bearing monarch, it implies one who rules over a vast territory, the known world, the universe, or the continent. So Dhamma-Chapter can either be the vehicle of the truth, or the realm where the norm of the universal truth holds sway. This realm is, to most of us, not a place in space and time, but a sense of community with all practitioners of the Dhamma. This sermon is also called Pavatana, which means it starts the wheel turning. All followers of the Buddha, no matter what their denomination or beliefs or style of practice, can relate to this sutta, and one never really outgrows it. It always remains a touchstone for practice because it reflects on the spiritual path in such fundamental terms. It is that which establishes the main theme of the Dhamma and the community of Sangha, those who practice the way. As this realm is vast in letter and spirit, this will be an ant's meanderings along its main street, sometimes drifting a little this way and that, but at least indicating that the realm is worth visiting. I hope the reader is more amenable than the original group of 5. So in that, he talks a little bit about the background of the sutta in the introduction, which I skipped over. But some of you will be very familiar with the story of the Buddha's life and this original teaching. Others it's less familiar. But this group of 5 wanderers that he was staying with in the deer park outside of Benares, a place called Isipatana, that they were a group of monks that he'd been practicing together with for quite some time, and engaging in the sort of yogic practices of austerity, self-mortification, so that they would endure various different kinds of hardships, like living on tiny amounts of food, 3 grains of rice a day, or standing on one leg for days and days, or sitting out in the cold and the rain during the cold seasons, or out in the blazing sun in the middle of the day in the hot season. So that there was that kind of tapas or austerity was, and still is today, very much a standard form of spiritual training that you find in India, and that the belief being that the more painful feeling that you experience, then the more you're developing tapas, which means spiritual heat or sort of psychic potency, and that the key moment in the Buddha's path was where he was the head of the group and practicing austerities to a far more extreme degree than the other people in the group. And his own descriptions of it, he said when he touched his stomach, he could feel his backbone. His ribs stood out like the rafters of an old broken down building. And he was so emaciated and so drained that he would just fall over in a faint and collapse. So that one day he had this realization that this austerity that he was practicing could only, he said that you could only experience so much painful feeling, and that the maximum limit of what could be experienced, he was experiencing. Like he said, as he put it, I know the limit to which this feeling goes. This is as much pain as any human being can experience. You can experience this much and no more. The needle is at the max. It can't go any further. But this is not liberating. This is not going anywhere. This is pointless, because I can endure this, but there's no good effect from this. So then he had this spontaneous memory of when he was a child and had been sitting in the shade of a tree. The stories vary about whether it was his father, the king Suddhodana, carrying out a ceremony, or just working in the fields in the region of Kapilavatu, where he grew up. And sitting as a young child, sitting in the shade of a tree, his mind just naturally fell into a state of concentration, and he experienced this blissful quality. And also the fact that his mind was focused, it was peaceful, it was clear, and it was plainly very, very wholesome and beautiful. So this spontaneous memory arose in his mind. He thought, well, why am I so afraid of pleasure? That was really pleasant. When my mind was concentrated, I was just a young child, I was sitting under the tree. Why am I afraid of such pleasure? That kind of pleasure has got absolutely nothing to do with anything unwholesome. Why am I afraid of it? Why do I call pleasure bad? Why do I think that? And so because he had the kind of spiritual resources, the intuition to follow that thought, he realized there's no reason why I shouldn't follow that. That is totally innocent. That kind of pleasure is harmless. In fact, maybe that's even the way to enlightenment, is to develop that kind of concentration, clarity of mind. Maybe these painful austerities are totally the wrong direction. I should go in this other way and develop clarity of mind, and irrespective of whether the body is comfortable or uncomfortable. And then immediately following that, there arose this clear intuition, this insight, yes, that's the way to enlightenment. So then he started eating ordinary food, and the stories go of the Sujata from the local village offering him some rice porridge, which then the other monks were totally disgusted at, that he was indulging in gruel. You might think the Amaravati porridge is not that exciting or indulgent. But if you were a yogi in India at that time, then it was outrageously luxurious. There you go. So, thank you. That was outrageously luxurious. So anyway, he decided to follow up that thought, irrespective of the fact that the other monks thought he'd lost it, and then he was no longer following the path. He decided that he would trust his own insight, his intuition, and went off to practice by himself. And so then, as the stories go, he gravitated to the riverbank of the river Niranjara, and what's now called Bodh Gaya, and then sitting down under the Bodhi tree, then that was where he realized full and complete enlightenment. And after the enlightenment, then his first thought, again, as most people will be aware, was that his first consideration was that this truth that I've awakened to, that I've understood, this is so subtle, this is so, so much against the grain of people's understanding and people's opinions. There's no point trying to explain this to anybody. No one will get this. So his mind was inclined to just him living as an independent yogi, just not trying to teach or explain this understanding to anyone. But then the Brahma god Sahampati then picked up this thought through the airwaves, through the cosmos, and appeared in front of, beamed down from the Brahma realms and appeared in front of the Buddha and said, please, for the benefit of those with just a little dust in their eyes, please come and into the world. And share the Dhamma that you understand. So when there's an invitation for a Dhamma talk, Brahma Chaloka Dipati Sahampati, that is recounting that same incident of the Brahma Sahampati inviting the Buddha to teach. So then he slowly made his way back from Uruvela by the river Niranjara to. It took a couple of months to walk from. They stayed under the Bodhi tree in that area for a little time, and then started walking back to Varanasi. And there he met up with his 5 former companions. And at first they saw him coming, and they thought, it's that wastrel. That failure of a monk, Gautama. He used to be our teacher, he used to be our guide and our mentor, but he totally blew it, he lost it, he started eating ordinary food. And look at him, he's kind of, you can't even see his bones. What kind of a yogi is he? But they couldn't help noticing that he had this extraordinary quality of serenity and clarity about his features, and this a very, very striking aura of peacefulness. And so even though their mouths were grumbling and saying, we shouldn't get up and we shouldn't pay respects to him and we shouldn't do anything for him, he's a failure, he's useless, he's a disgrace, even though their mouths were saying these kind of critical things, they found themselves jumping up and making a seat for him and getting him some drinking water and so on. They couldn't help themselves from acting in a respectful way. And so then when the Buddha had then sat down and addressed them, he said, friends, the deathless has been realized, and if you pay attention to what I say, then in no long time, then you too also will be able to realize this quality. And they said, well, how could you possibly make that kind of a claim to realize the ultimate truth, to realize the deathless? You failed as a monk. You gave up the path. You're not a monk anymore. You're eating ordinary food. You quit. So how can you possibly claim to be enlightened? That's ridiculous. And so then, as it always happens in these stories, the Buddha they went back and forth 3 times, and the Buddha said, "Good friends, if you pay attention to what I have to say, then in no long time you will understand the truth that I have awakened to." After he says this 3 times, and then they poo-poo it and dismiss it 3 times, then the Buddha then makes it clear to them. He says, "Friends, have I ever spoken to you in this way before?" Say, "No, you never have." Okay, so if you listen to what I've got to say, then in no long time you too will also awaken to this truth. And so then after that insistence, they decided, okay, we'll listen to what he's got to say, and that was the kind of beginning of the Dhamma-Chapter Sutta. His explanation then followed on. So there had to be that readiness in them to listen first of all, and so that's why also we have the custom of inviting a talk to be given, is that there has to be a readiness. Okay, please, yes, I want to listen. Please tell me. I'm ready to hear. And so that only when the people were ready to listen and there was a receptivity to some degree, then the Buddha was prepared to speak. Ajahn Sucitto talks a little bit about the title there, the Dhamma-Chakra, the wheel of Dhamma. And so we're very familiar with this symbol as we have now, but it's significant that the wheel was a symbol of conquest in India. That the Aryans had, and this is different histories talk about it in different ways, but this is one of the reasons that I've read, or I feel is quite significant within Indian history, because when the Aryans came from the Middle East and invaded India sometime before the Buddha's era, and that movement came from the northwest and invaded India, and the previous cultures of Mohenjo-daro and Harappa and what's called the Dravidian culture was conquered and then moved down into the south of India, and then the Aryan conquerors established their lands in the north, one of the reasons why those invading armies were able to conquer the existing populations of India was because they had the wheel. They had wheeled chariots, they had wheeled vehicles, and so that the wheel became a symbol of sort of military power and conquest and strength. And so the Buddha was also a warrior noble. Before he became a monk, he was out of the warrior noble caste. So out of that group, and so that then he, as he did many times in his teaching, he took the symbol, like so that the wheel was a symbol of military conquest, or like the Chakravarti ruler, the wheel turning monarch, is the name of a sort of universal ruler, and he turned the image around, saying this is the Dhamma-Chapter, this is the wheel not of military conquest, but a wheel of the conquest by truth. And so I feel is a very sort of significant, element and an aspect of his style of teaching, that he would take familiar words or forms and then change the meaning or even reverse the meaning. So when he gave this teaching and he also using the imagery of setting the wheel of Dhamma rolling, it's like this is a new conquest. This is a new movement coming into society, rather than an alien population invading the country on the physical level. But this is the force of truth itself, the actual presence of reality being invited to roll into our lives and to have its effect upon our world. So those are some opening comments and remarks about the Dhamma-Chapter Pavattana Sutta. So people have any questions? There's a lot of folks gathered together. So, if anybody has any questions either about what I've said or any gaps in the picture so far, then please speak up.
I'm interested to hear more about how the middle way is applied in the Eightfold Path.
Well, it's significant that when he says, what is the middle way? And he says the middle way is the Eightfold Path. And that word samma, in essence, is key to that. So the word samma, there's an interesting comments that are made by Ajahn Amaro about the word samma, because when we translate it into English as right, like right view, right speech, right concentration and so forth. But the word right in that respect is not right as just as opposed to wrong, but also has the connotations of right as in upright, righted, something that's sort of the bottle's knocked over, the bottle's on its side now, the bottle has been righted. And so sometimes when people, when translating that word samma into English, then people avoid that use of the word right because of its connotations as opposite of wrong. So they'll say wise view, wise thought, wise speech, wise action, or to avoid that kind of dualistic or polarizing quality of right and wrong. But Ajahn Amaro makes this interesting point. There's a word samma, which is with one M instead of two, and visamma, which is its opposite, which is a musical term meaning an instrument that's in tune. So when the strings of a vina, or of a lute or a guitar or a stringed instrument, when they are samma, then all the strings are in tune with each other. When they are visamma, then they're out of tune. And so his point is saying that that word samma as a musical term is closely related to samma as in right, as in samma, right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, and the elements of the Eightfold Path. So that middleness is the attunement of our actions, attunement of our view to reality. So right view means that my views are in tune with reality, or right resolution, right intention, samma sankappa. That the intentions are in tune with Dhamma, in tune with reality. So that sometimes when I'm talking about this and explaining it, rather than saying right, or in terms of explaining the Eightfold Path, I'll explain it in this way and talk about attuned effort, or attuned action, attuned livelihood, and that gives us more of a sense, because we all know what maybe some of us have not got a musical ear and some of us have, but we can usually tell when something is discordant, when it's out of tune. We go, "Ooh, there, that's flat, or that's sharp, or those strings are need to be adjusted." We recognize that on a natural, intuitive level. So it's applying that same quality of middleness to say things being in tune with Dhamma, and then that just using the term middle way, expand the details of the middle way, the details of that quality of balance or attunement is then spelled out in those different areas of our life, in our mental world, our actions, our speech, our meditation.
In my or you, I think in terms of harmony, in harmony, since it's the same.
Exactly, yeah, exactly.
I don't know whether it's just a nice story or whether there's some evidence in terms of Pali or Sanskrit. A German Pali Sanskrit scholar pointed out that Samma is meant as, well, in German you have right as something like giving direction. The word right. Richtig. Richtung is direction.
Uh-huh.
So directing to liberation. So in that sense, all the Samma, the meaning is that it has the right direction to liberation.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, I don't know the evidence in terms of Pali, but in German it does make sense.
Yeah. But also we find our insights in all sorts of different places, whether it's sort of folk etymology or real etymology. Another interesting thing in terms of the wheel symbolism that Bhikkhu Analayo, and later on during this retreat, we'll probably spend 3 months just on the Dhamma-Chapter Sutta, but if we get through the first 3 discourses and we get onto, I thought of getting onto the Satipatthana Sutta and Bhikkhu Analayo's book on that. There's a very interesting point that he makes in that about the word dukkha, because dukkha is very central as a concept to the Four Noble Truths. That's the key piece, talking about dukkha. And so that it again is like the English word right for some people are uncomfortable with that. It doesn't quite fit perfectly. Also, the word suffering for dukkha doesn't quite fit perfectly, because happiness is also dukkha. Being young and healthy is dukkha, because if it's unsatisfactory, because if it's identified and attached to, then as youth turns into age and health turns into sickness, then the painfulness manifests and is apparent. But still, you would say happiness and health and good looks and youth are dukkha. They're unsatisfactory, even though they're really pleasant in their presence. They're still dukkha in terms of Buddhist psychology. So the point that Bhikkhu Analayo makes is that the word dukkha is made of 2 parts. The first part, du, is from the root dus, which means wrong or imbalanced or out of order. That is the du, and that's you find in many different Pali words as a prefix, du. And then the second part is akka, and the English word axle is probably related to this Pali word akka. The akka is the hole in the middle of a wheel that the axle goes through. So dukkha is like the axle is off center. So the example that everyone can relate to is the supermarket trolley with the wonky wheel that makes you smash into the orange juice section, or at the airport you're colliding with other trolleys trying to get to the carousel, and you can, your wheel is pushing you the wrong way. So that again gives a very clear sense of dukkha is that quality of things being out of balance or out of kilter. The world is out of order, and so that wrongness, it's not so much of a sort of value judgment as a concept, but that feeling of, in a way, the supermarket trolley is the perfect example. Like that feeling of, oh damn, how can I keep this thing under control? And that sort of stressful, uncomfortable quality of having to deal with that wrongness. So it's that felt sense of things being out of balance. So the again, it's coming from the symbolism of the wheel. Whether the Buddha intended it to be related so directly, I can't say. Second guessing the Buddha is not a very good idea, but you can see there's a relatedness in that. Any other questions? It was your suggestion to have this sutta thing arising in your thoughts? Apart from embarrassment about being asked a question in front of everybody? Yes, Chitta.
When you read it, does Kundalini's response or insight, is it triggered by a particular set of words, or is it just by hearing the whole?
Well, it's interesting in that up to that point the Buddha hasn't specifically mentioned impermanence in the teaching. And that phrase that is used to describe Kondanya's insight, Yankinchi samudaya dhammang sabantang nirodha dhammanti, that is so in many other instances in the teachings that is used to characterize people realizing stream entry. But it's in a way it's representing that crystallization of understanding in Kandanya, that having seen that all things are unsatisfactory, but also that there doesn't have to be any clinging to things. And then, in a way, that the insight of everything that arises passes away, all that's subject to arising is subject to ceasing. It's representing, in a sense, that spirit of not clinging. Like, well, why would you cling to anything? Why would you create a self or a feeling of ownership around anything? Because everything that arises passes away. So nothing can be kept, nothing can be owned. There isn't anything that's personal here at all, and so it's representing that how that took shape in his mind at that time. Again, I'm second guessing arahants of 2,500 years ago. It's not. I can't say that my interpretation is going to be correct, but in a way, it's it's taking the essence, or the thing that makes all the difference in the Four Noble Truths is in the second noble truth, the origin of dukkha and letting go of it. The pahata banti, it is to be let go of, it is to be abandoned. Pahinanti, it has been let go of. So that that in a way, I mean, again, I'm sort of guessing the flow of thought, but realizing, if there's no clinging, if the heart does not attach to things that are changing, then there's no problem. If everything is always changing, and so if you don't attach, if there's no clinging, there's no attachment, then you don't get say, born into the feeling of hope for taking hold of the pleasant, and then turns into disappointment. And you don't get born into things which are unpleasant, that you try to get rid of and get away from, because they're going to change anyway. And so that, in a way, you can see it's a ripening of that insight into non-clinging. And think, everything that arises passes away. Well, why cling to anything? That's it. And so that then it's, in a sense, that I would say that key piece of it, saying, okay, that's, and when that non-clinging is say, actualized, then there's no dukkha. That sense of wrongness or things being out of balance, that stops. There's no dukkha. Look at that. No clinging, no dukkha. And then, so that then the second part of the third noble truth, Satchikanta Bhanti means it is to be realized. It is to be appreciated. And so then, seeing that the non-clinging or letting go is the essence of what you do, and then when that has been done, when that has been acted on, then there's dukkha nirodha. Look at that, no dukkha. And that, we'll talk about it more when we get to that section of it, but that conscious appreciation of the absence of dukkha is the way that third noble truth is fully, fully manifested or fully realized, is that, there is no dukkha. There isn't any. That the mind isn't just letting go of something and then appreciating that sort of release from dukkha as a temporary thing, but realizing more completely and fully, it's not just a sudden quietness. The noise has stopped, but when the mind stays with that, the quality of non-clinging, free from clinging, free from entanglement, then in a way that recognition of that feeling of imbalance, that feeling of dukkha, that wasn't the basic reality. That was just something that was happening, and now it stopped happening. That was an intrusion. That was an addition to the basic reality of things, and now it's stopped. So then, in that moment, there's like a conscious realization of the presence of the Dhamma. So we call it dukkha nirodha, the cessation of dukkha, but you can also call it the recognition of the Dhamma as well. So that then that it's and those, I would say, it's the coming together of those two parts, or those core elements of the Four Noble Truths, the letting go of clinging, and then the realization of Dhamma, the realization of the ending of dukkha, then that takes shape in his mind. Oh, everything that arises passes away. Yeah. What was I getting so upset about? What was there to get excited about or be stressed about? And then there's that experience of understand. That's how he expresses the understanding.